night is our singing here at Lebanon, associational singing. So these young fellows can get them up a good tune between now and then. I know they do good. Bentley did a good job this morning. It is a little scary when you first starting out. I know, and sometimes it's scary when you've been doing this a long time. And I've got over a half a century, and sometimes I get pretty scared. And that's not a bad thing either. But remember our singing this Saturday night, and we talked about the nation of Israel, and we talk a lot about the nation of Israel. And there's not much said about the Gentiles throughout the Old Testament. It's mainly focused on the nation of Israel, beginning about the 12th chapter of Genesis when God called Abraham. Now, that does not mean that the Gentiles were forgotten, but now they were responsible to God just like everybody else. You see, the call of Abraham is what separated the Jewish and come to be the Jewish nation, and then the Gentiles. Well, they're still all responsible, and the nation of Israel was supposed to be a great example. Now, when we think about the Gentiles, what about them? Well, they were just as evil as the nation of Israel was at the height of her idolatry. And in the first chapter of the book of Romans, we're going to start reading there in a minute, that Paul, in preaching to the Gentiles, when he left, and he's now talking about preaching to those in Rome, but he speaks of Gentile guilt. Well, they were guilty of everything else. It wasn't just Israel, and we are responsible in every area, every tribe unto God. And we have some history of some of the things the Gentiles did right along with the Jews and the nation of Israel and Judah. So we don't need to cast too many stones, but we can look at what Paul has to say about those who were guilty in a past age, and then we can make some comparisons to what's going on in the present day. Now, we still live in a world of sin. We still live in a time when hearts are depraved, and every person that's born into this world comes into it with a depraved heart. And they come into the world, and they soon become able to think for themselves and to make decisions, and they're responsible to God. Now, when we think about in verse 18 of Romans chapter 1, the reason for the Gentile guilt, he says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold," or literally, hold back the truth in unrighteousness. "Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things." Now, we will stop right there for a moment, and we're reading what Paul had to say to the church at Rome, and basically concerning Gentile behavior in past time. Now, he talks about, first of all, the wrath of God. Now, we were told from the very, very beginning when Eve ate of that whatever it was she wasn't supposed to eat of, and gave to Adam, and he did eat, and they voluntarily became sinners. And from then on, people have a sin nature. And the wrath of God has been handed down to every person ever since that day. That no individual, save Jesus Christ, has come into this world that is not responsible to God. Now, we have a responsibility to our Creator, and we have an opportunity to serve Him or to not serve Him. And Paul here is speaking about those who had steered themselves away, and that they are against God, and the wrath is revealed. He said, from heaven. Now, it's not from some judge here on this earth that is responsible to God, and he's doing things wrong. It's not some government here on this earth that is handing out unrighteous or undeserved guilt. The revealing is from heaven itself, where God is enthroned and in charge of everything, and His sovereignty is revealed. Now, what was it revealed about? From all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Ungodliness. We see a multitude of ungodliness in the world every day. We have communications now at the speed of light, and we know what's going on around the world. I read some years ago where in one of the elections in the 1800s that it was 3 months before the people in California knew who the president was. And now we have communications, believe it or not, that we know before the polls close who's going to be the president. I don't think that's altogether good, but it's the way it is. Now, just to say that, just to emphasize the quickness and all the things that go on around the world. People protesting today about things that they don't like, and they should be looking to God and praying for righteousness, but now here they are, still going on in the world today. And he said, ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Unrighteousness, we could just start and tally a list from the ceiling to the floor, and we could fill it right up of all the unrighteous things of men. And even in the spiritual and the religious world, we have those who are holding back the truth in unrighteousness. There are many religions around the world today, some that we're not that familiar with if we hadn't studied comparative religion, but I have had a course in that. I didn't learn near all there was to learn, but people worshiping animals today and forbidding to eat certain animals because they feel that might be one of their ancestors or such, but they hold the truth in unrighteousness. Now, they hold it back. They don't want people to know the truth. Satan wants people to preach falsehoods. Do you realize that Satan really doesn't care how far away you get from God, but on the other hand, he doesn't care just how close you come to God and to Jesus Christ, just as long as you don't connect up with the truth. In fact, he likes for people to get really, really close, and there's some religions, denominations under the disguise of Christianity that they come so close, but they're not going to make it with what they teach. It's that way today. Now, in verse 19, where he said, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. It's not that people doesn't know there's a God. Man is a worshiper by nature. Just about everybody worships something. You say, well, what about the atheist? Yes, that's their religion. They're worshiping the fact that there's no God, but they're wrong. In fact, when Helen Keller was growing up, sad story to read and to know about Helen Keller, but she was born blind, deaf, could not speak. But when her instructor finally made communication with her, and they somehow communicated that she said that she knew somehow that there was a God that created her. Now, that ought to tell us something. That deep down we know that there is someone and power above us. And that everyone knows, and they are not ignorant of this. And Paul writes here, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, or shown to them. Everyone knows there is a God. They know that there's some kind of power. Now, how? For God hath showed it unto them. I really do not believe that there's that many true atheists in the world today. I think a lot of people use that for an excuse not to face up to their sins and not to face up to anything, and they just proclaim themselves an atheist and go on. Hope nobody bothers them. I suppose there are a few who are deep down believers that there is no God, that there's no reason to prepare for the future or eternity, but not many. Now, the Bible tells us that the stars and the heavens declare unto us the handiwork of God. Now, they don't declare that there is a God. They declare the handiwork of God. You see, God even illustrated to Abraham when he called him, and he said, look up into the sky and count the stars. Well, have you ever tried that? Well, it's kind of foolish, and every kid probably has, and things get to running together, you know, before you get very far, and you're lost. And he was actually saying to Abraham that I'm going to make your descendants as the stars of the heaven, as the sand of the sea. In other words, they were going to be innumerable, that there wasn't going to be any limit. Now, in all this, we look and the heavens declare, and we see the stars and the patterns, and we see the sun and the moon and all these wonderful things, and they declare the glory of God. Now, isn't it amazing, since the beginning of time, that every 365 and 1/4 days, the earth goes around the sun? And isn't it amazing that every night we see a pattern of the moon? It may be full, it may be half, or we may just see a portion of it as it continues, but it's been happening ever since the beginning. And it's going to continue until the end. You hear people say once in a while, and you know, when it got to be about quitting time and everybody was tired, we used to say, "Well, we'll stop today, and if the sun don't shine tomorrow, we won't need to come back." Well, you know is kind of a irrational statement when you get to thinking about it. The sun's going to shine tomorrow, or it's going to be where it's supposed to be. We may not see it. You say, well, how do you know? Because there's the time it's going to be here until the Lord comes, and it's going to be here an additional 1,000 years after that. So it's going to be there tomorrow. There may be a lot of change in things, but it's going to be here. Now, God has shown himself and his design for everything. Now, let's take one other consideration. Where there is design, there also has to be a designer. That might not be the best word you could use, but you get the idea. That's true. Now, we see things designed. I heard of a book once. I've never seen it. It's been out of print ever since I heard of it. But it was entitled, Man Does Not Walk Alone. And one of the illustrations from a friend of mine who read it said that a professor said to put in a hat the numbers 1 through 10 and shake them up good, and what is the possibilities of a person drawing them out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all through 10 in correct order. Well, it's so phenomenal that it can't be done. We must look at things and see that God is far greater and far ahead of us. I'll use another illustration. Tomorrow night's going to be the close of this March Madness. It's costing us, according to economists, $20 billion in productivity while it's going on. That no one yet has ever filled out a bracket completely right since it started. You see, we're pretty weak in our predictions and all things. Well, just to go along with that 1 through 10, but God knows all. Now, he begins to talk about the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Invisible thing. Well, what's invisible? Take a deep breath. What'd you breathe in? A lot of oxygen and other things. What'd you exhale? Carbon dioxide. It changed from the time it went in till the time it came out. And we didn't see a bit of it. Plants, they do the opposite thing. They take in carbon dioxide and put out oxygen so we can live. Strange, isn't it? But the invisible things of the world are clearly seen because we live and breathe and we have our being because of them. The atom has never been seen, but it's been split and caused great havoc and fear in the lives of humanity because of atomic power. Now, these are the things that God put here that man has discovered. He said, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power, that is the everlasting power, and Godhead. The Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the result is that we have no excuses. We're not excusable. These Gentiles in the world, they were without excuse, and we are without excuse. Now, did they know God? Of course they knew God. From Adam, God talked with him, and he spoke to Adam and Eve there in the garden after that they had sinned. And God has spoken to a number of people that we have record of in the Scripture. And it says, because that when they knew God, they knew Him. They glorified Him not as God. You see, they run away. They went backwards, and they didn't give glory to their Creator. Neither were thankful. We have a lot of people in the world today that they are not thankful for anything. They just go on like everything is supposed to fall into their lap, but became vain or empty in their imaginations. We talked about, reckon how Noah felt. You know what brought the flood on Noah and his family and the rest of the world? And they were the only ones that were saved. Because man was only vain in his imaginations all the time, and the Lord finally said, it's enough. Back over there to the book of Genesis and see if that wasn't the reason. Because they were constantly vain in their imagination. And he says also their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. You ever listen to some of these people in the world that's supposed to be intelligent? And they talk about things that are so foolish. It's just like sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal, as Paul put it over there in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. It makes no sense at all. Now, in verse 23, they begin to back away and change the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man. What's God going to look like? I don't know. You read over there in the book of John where John is talking about worshiping, and he said we must worship in spirit and in truth. Why? He said because God is a spirit. Can we see a spirit? You see, man in his imagination has wanted God to be equal or less, in a lot of cases, than we are. Well, you see, that's just not true. Just like the Jews or the Israelites and those in our Sunday school lesson, they had changed the glory of God. And the Gentiles, right along with them, were doing the same thing and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God. Now, we've been studying Ezekiel on Wednesday nights, and we talked about the glory of God came and filled the temple. It was a cloud. You see, it's still mysterious, and we can't fully understand. Someday we will. But now, they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man. Some people say, well, now this is God, what God's going to look like. Well, that is a prohibition of the commandment of God, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. And to birds, some come up with the idea that, you know, this particular bird, maybe the eagle, we don't know. Paul doesn't tell us. He said, and made the image of God into some sort of a bird. We know something about the four-footed beast because the Egyptians, they had these bulls down there in Egypt, and the Israelites brought that with them when they came out of Egypt, and they later used it and put it to use, and creeping things. You ever hear Wendy Bagwell tell that story about being over in the hills of Kentucky, and he was at this church, and they all got into the spirit, and then they brought out these rattlesnakes. They're still doing foolish things in the world today. I'm on Wendy's side here. He said, would you not take one if the Lord commanded you to? And he said, I surely would, but he didn't, and I ain't. I'm with him. We need to stick with the Spirit and get away from all these things that are mentioned. Well, now, with all of this, what was the result? Well, he goes a little bit further, and he said, wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. What was the cause of all this? Or what did it result in as far as the Gentiles in the world? Well, it resulted in a heart that was changed. A heart that brought on all manners of things, and he said to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. That philosophy has been reviving quite a lot in the last 20 years or so, and that people are now not even embarrassed about it, and they force it out on every hand that they can, and they're recruiting people into the homosexual communities and all manners of things. And he said, who changed the truth of God into a lie. How much does it take to change truth to a lie? Well, really not much. You just change one word in a sentence, or you pull a word out and plug in another one, and you get people reading it and believing it. It's like old fellows down at the liar's bench, wherever that might be, whether it's under a shade tree or up in town around the coffee shop or whatever, and people get telling these tales, and finally, they'll just tell them so long, they get to believing it. Maybe it just starts out as a funny, entertaining joke, but in a little while, they get to believing that stuff. They changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator. Now, tell me, in simple or complex terms, how that the creature could ever become greater than the Creator. You see, these animals that are on this earth, they were created by the God of heaven, and he gave them to Adam, and he named them. They didn't start out as a one-cell protozoa that come up out of the ocean, and finally man has evolved. if that were true, I would wonder why something hasn't evolved greater than man. Why did it stop way back somewhere? Well, because it didn't. They just changed the truth, and they served the Creator, the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this cause God gave them up to vile affections, for even the women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. Start at the 18th chapter of Genesis and read through 18, 19, and 20 and see what happened when God got fed up with things that are being promoted today. Where he destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, down there in that area, the only thing there is a bunch of igneous rock, and there's thousands of them as black as coal, and you can walk over them, and there's hardly even any grass growing at all. You say, well, what caused it? Because it rained down fire from heaven and destroyed those places. Because of the conduct of humanity. It was a judgment of God. Why? And receiving in themselves the recompense of their error which was meet, or which was due. God wasn't unreasonable. He just punished them. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, we have a revival of that today in society where they want to take the name of God out of everything. They want to exclude anything that's religious. And if you mention certain words, they say, well, that is a conflict between church and state, which in most every case it's not. They didn't want to retain knowledge. Well, what did God do? He said, okay, here it is. And he gave them over to a reprobate mind. No wonder we see some of these crazy-minded people in the world and some of the things that they advocate and some of the sins that's committed and the crimes that are committed. It's because they do not have a right mind. God has changed them to do those things which are not convenient. Now, he lists a number of things, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. Sounds like that era is just about like today, doesn't it? Not a lot of difference. Who, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. They just enjoyed watching others. Sad commentary. But Paul here is really talking about what happened when the society turns against their Creator and when they follow in the wrong direction and they listen to the winds of Satan. A fellow told me once there's no bottom to the well of depravity. I don't think a truer statement's ever been made. We need to cling to the truth, turn our backs on the things that the world advocates. We'll